Hello everyone, it's been a long time since I did a live video here on Facebook, and so I thought I would share something today that I found very interesting. It triggered something very interesting for me. So a friend of mine, Adrian, posted something about the ancient people. He was specifically talking about Achilles, And in the interaction on the Facebook group, he shared that, people at that time, thousands of years ago, they had a stronger connection to the deeper dimensions, to the spiritual dimensions. And it triggered out a whole awareness in me about understanding the difference between what the Taoists call the Shen and the Jing, or the awareness and the essence, okay? So let's see if we can, what he says is really true. And like, why is that true? Why did people, thousands and thousands of years ago have such a strong spirituality? Obviously they had a lot of war and all sorts of other things, but there was a strong connection to the deeper dimensions, right? And the reason for that is basically the Jing, So life endows humanity with this Jing, this sort of vitality that gets passed down through your ancestors, right? So you can imagine back in Achilles' time, there was maybe 200,000 human beings on the planet. So those 200,000 people had the Jing of the life force inside of their body, right? So that gives you a very strong connection to the deeper spiritual dimensions. Now, where we are today, there's 8 billion human beings on the planet. So that means all of that Jing, every time a new life is created, the Jing subtly diminishes. It starts to diminish until we get into the state we are today, where people feel very disconnected from those deeper dimensions. So then the question becomes like, well, how do we reverse that? How do we change that, right? And so to do that, we have to understand possibly, a human life, because that Jing Shen experience of a human life really addresses this issue. So what do I mean? When a young baby is born, right, it's full of Jing. It's full of vitality, right? This is why in the Tao Te Ching they say a baby can cry and cry all day and never get tired. It's because their connection to those deeper dimensions, especially the Jing, the vitality, the essence is very, very strong in a small child. And the awareness is virtually non-existent, especially in a newborn, right? This is why parents are so excited when the baby suddenly, maybe within 5 weeks or 2 months, suddenly the baby's awareness, its Shen, wakes up and it realizes, oh, there's my mum, there's my dad, and it's a wonderful experience, right? Where the baby's awareness grows. But until that moment, it's mostly Jing. And then, of course, as the baby gets older, what happens is, this is the whole process that all of us go through in life, is that our Shen, our awareness, hopefully starts to grow. We become more and more aware, we grow more, we become, more awake in a way, because our Shen is growing, and you often see that in the light in the eyes. That's the Shen, and the aura, how much light is coming out. That's the Shen development, right? Now, oftentimes, in our 40s or maybe earlier, we start a spiritual practice, and oftentimes that spiritual practice is what I call a Shen development practice. It's a meditation practice, it's an awareness practice. It's not necessarily, in my experience, it ignores the Jing cultivation, okay? And basically, you're cultivating the Shen aspect of the life force, And so the reverse can happen. As you get older, what happens is, the Shen grows and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It's almost like it becomes top heavy and the Jing is neglected. This is why you can have, great spiritual awareness, but a weak body or weak vitality, because the Jing is not being cultivated, and more importantly, it's not being transmuted and transformed. So one of the things that the microcosmic orbit does, and some of you probably know what that is, maybe some of you don't, but it's about moving the energy from the lower centers up to the higher spiritual centers, and then the most important thing is it starts to reverse. So you have the yang movement, which is from Jing to Qi to Shen, and then you have the Yin movement, which is from Shen to Jing to Qi to Jing. And it's very important on your journey that you do that transformation. So if you develop a lot of Shen, it's very important to then, especially when you're older, to transform that back into Jing. Because otherwise, you're sort of half cooked, half baked. you're top heavy, just like that little baby was full of Jing with no Shen. Now you're an adult and you're a spiritual teacher or a guru, and you're full of Shen, but your Jing is weak. Your Jing is like somehow diminished. And this can show up very subtly, for example, of feeling like that this world is like not as important as the spiritual world. You might have a subtle judgment against the body, against the feminine, you know. But fundamentally, one of the things that you're going to notice is that the body starts to lose its vitality. And this is why, as we get older, you know, things happen to our body, like, you know, the teeth falling out, the hair falling out, and just generally getting tighter, right? Because the Jing is being diminished, you know, and there's many ways that the Jing gets diminished. One of the main ways, of course, is working too hard, not getting enough sleep, you know, bad food, bad diet, you know, but also for men, you know, ejaculation. For women, it's like giving birth. You know, all of these things diminish the Jing, and they need to be replenished. You know, this is why, for example, in China, if a woman, you know, especially not modern day China, I'm talking going back to the Taoist times, if a woman gave birth, after giving birth, she spends 2, 3, 4 weeks just in bed with the baby, and the community comes around and nourishes that woman, because the Taoists knew that giving birth, there's a lot of Jing that gets released. And if you don't replenish it, you know, by resting, it can shorten your life, you know. So this is very real, okay, these things, they're real, all right? So this is why the microcosmic is so important, and why it's one of the basic practices in Taoism, because we're transforming the Jing up to the Qi, to the Shen, but then we're reversing it. We're taking all of that Shen that we've cultivated and we're transforming it back into life force, back into Jing. And this makes for a very balanced spiritual practice, okay? But it's not an immortal practice. What do I mean? Doing the microcosmic will give you a long life. It cultivates your postnatal Qi, your Qi that you were born with. It allows you to have a much longer life. It allows you to have much more vitality, less disease. You're more balanced, you're more grounded than a lot of people that only develop Shen, for example, okay? But it's not an immortality practice. In other words, you're not accessing the prenatal Jing as like a source for you, as a source of your energy, all right? You're not accessing it. To do that, you have to change and reverse the sort of postnatal, or, you know, this position of water and fire, you know, of the Shen, the heart spirit, is usually more in the upper part of the body, and the Jing is more in the lower part of the body, in the sex part of the body, right? And in lesser enlightenment, water and fire, what happens is, in the microcosmic, we're just exchanging and we're balancing those energies. In the next level, the immortality level, we reverse the fire and water. So now they become in what's called a steady state. It's a little bit like nuclear fusion. Because what happens now is that the fire is rising up, the water is sinking down, and they're opening up a portal to the deeper dimensions inside of you. And it allows the prenatal Jing, the prenatal Qi, and the prenatal Shen to start to flow into your energy body in this dimension. And this is why the Taoists call this the development of the spiritual fetus, because it's that feeling of Jing that you need to have this steady state inside of you. It's the same as a woman, you know, when she's pregnant, she feels something growing inside of her. And it's no different in the spiritual dimensions. We develop this spiritual fetus. It's literally our divine self being birthed into this dimension. And most importantly, given Jing. You can actually feel the prenatal Jing coming in and creating this connection inside of you back to those deeper dimensions. It's very profound, this, and it's why the immortality practices are different to meditation practices or just Shen development practices. It's this connection to the prenatal Jing that creates a long life, vitality, health. But those are secondary. Those are like secondary benefits. The main benefit is it creates a steady state inside of you, a very blissful, steady state. It's like this fetus becomes real inside of you, and it's vibrating continually at those higher vibrations. It's not up here. It's down in your lower down Chen. That spiritual fetus has a life of its own. Eventually, that spiritual fetus will grow up into a small child, and it will just go through that whole process that you go through in the physical dimension. It's no different in the spiritual dimensions. You grow your soul. You grow your ability to maintain and to identify with these deeper dimensions. And understanding the prenatal Jing is very critical in this. It's very, very important. So some of you know that every year this will be the third year, I've been running a 6-month program where I take 10 committed students through this process of opening up to this prenatal Jing and creating this spiritual fetus inside your energy body. It's a very profound practice. And honestly, once that starts to wake up inside of you, it's unmistakable. It's unmistakable. You have this steady state inside of you. So if you've been frustrated in your life that you have these high states of consciousness, but then you can't maintain it, you know, it's like you go to sleep, you wake up the next day, and suddenly it's gone, you know. The reason for that is the Jing, the prenatal Jing, is not being developed. Only the Shen is being developed, and it becomes very unstable. You need the Jing, okay? You need the cultivation of the prenatal Jing. And that's what distinguishes the difference between Taoist immortality and what I call regular meditation practices that often are just cultivating the Shen, just cultivating the awareness. Please understand, I'm not down on it. It's very good to be more aware in our life. It's fantastic. It's great to cultivate Shen. But we don't have the complete picture if we're not cultivating our Jing as well. And this is why these practices are longevity practices. They give you a sense of vitality. You need less sleep. I mean, all sorts of magical things happen with these immortality practices. If you're interested in applying for my program as an interview process, we already have 3 people signed up for this semester starting in 2023, so there's 7 places left. Please schedule a call with me, and don't let money be the thing that stops you. If your heart feels called to it, call me up. We can set up some type of payment plan for you. Just visit the program below, see if it's something that interests you, and if you feel called to it, then please, set up a call with me. There's a place on the website where you can do that. Let's see if there's any comments or any questions here. There's hardly anyone on here, I think. So we'll just leave it, I think. There doesn't seem to be that many people. It's probably quite early in the morning in Europe, and very early in the States. Okay, so that's all I really wanted to say about the prenatal Jing and the difference between the two things. Lots of love, everyone. Take care.